New reporting on a partisan purge, a plan to politicize the FBI. This involves Donald Trump, and I'm going to show you exactly what's happening. But the first thing to know is this breaks with history and precedent. It is not normal, it is not standard, and it is not part of the other traditional and even expected personnel moves that you have between administrations. You may have heard the term political appointee in our coverage of these hearings. That's all standard. What's not standard and what could be a Friday night sort of news dump, an effort to hide something that Donald Trump doesn't want you to see on the news tonight, is this. Top nonpartisan and career FBI officials basically being pushed in a so-called purge to resign or face firing. Agents who were involved in investigations of MAGA, of the crime spree that was well documented on January 6th, and related investigations that also touched on Donald Trump's role. They are being told, as the AP reports, that they'll be moved to fire those agents involved in that. A letter was sent to agents, quote, given your significant role in prosecuting the president, a reference to when they were investigating the former president. The FBI actually does not prosecute, although it gathers the evidence therefore. Quote, I do not believe the leadership of the department can trust you to assist in implementing the president's agenda faithfully. The New York Times reports this could affect hundreds of career agents. We're talking about the nonpartisan people who keep the country safe, and we're talking about expertise that's used to deal with crime fighting, from national security, terror investigations, the immigration issues that the administration has said they care about. This is a gutting of that for allegedly political reasons. NBC's Ken Delanian reports this is also national, targeting over 20 heads of FBI field offices, including in big cities like Miami and Washington. Now, Donald Trump has tapped Kash Patel, who's had those hearings just this week, to run the FBI. And in a sign that some were concerned about this possibility, the idea that punishing people, going after agents who did their jobs for political reasons, would be a bad thing. And notice that Mr. Patel, whether he was aware of this coming or not, disclaimed, basically opposed what multiple outlets are reporting Trump and his team are now trying to do tonight.
Are you aware of any plans or discussions to punish in any way, including termination, FBI agents or personnel associated with Trump investigations? Yes or no?
I am not aware of that.
Thank you.
Patel saying there yesterday he was not aware of that. And another question that I'm going to show you, which matters to all this, he also said there shouldn't be political purges. But let me show you more of the reporting. The AP says this would be, and has begun, as a major blow to the historic independence from the White House of the FBI, part of a startling pattern of retribution waged on federal government employees. I want to be very clear, this is a break in precedent. While if you go back far enough in history, there have been FBI abuses, I've mentioned that in our coverage, since the reform of the Hoover era, you have had past FBI directors, of course FBI agents, and other special counsels who, by their very definition of their jobs, sometimes have to investigate people in the federal government. Could be members of Congress accused of bribery. Could be people who work for the president. Could involve the president himself. But those folks have typically stayed on the job and not faced retribution or firing. And to state the obvious, I'll just spell it out for you. If the United States becomes the type of country that fires law enforcement for doing law enforcement, then we will have a completely tilted, corrupt version of law enforcement. Make no mistake, what the letter says, according to these multiple outlets, is that these FBI agents, who are nonpartisan, who are the career folks, many of them, are being asked to leave or fired because they did their job, and because they investigated MAGA, and because they investigated something we all lived through, a convicted sedition against the democracy in the Capitol of the United States. Last Friday, Donald Trump also did a late-night purge of a different branch of the government. These were inspectors general. And I want to be clear. Parts of that removal may ultimately prove lawful. That is, even though the president might have violated the notice rules and the statute on that, he does ultimately have the authority there to remove inspectors general. If, however, in the future, folks can prove that this was an effort to politicize law enforcement or to do selective prosecution, to get rid of the nonpartisan people and bring in partisan people, and if they start doing partisan investigations or prosecutions, that itself could be unlawful. That's one reason Kash Patel himself, the FBI's nominee under the Trump administration, said they're against this type of political retribution and purging of FBI agents. Let's go to someone who knows all about this. Frank Figliuzzi was former assistant director for counterintel at the FBI. Walk us through where this fits in. I mentioned that the president has wide authority to pick his cabinet and team. There's an advice and consent of the Senate. But that type of personnel shift we see, very standard. This reaching down to the agent level, to field offices, and all but admitting that it's for partisan purposes. How extreme is this? And does it concern you about the crime-fighting abilities of the FBI going forward?
Yeah, Ari, this is indeed unprecedented in the history of the FBI. And the one message I hope people hear tonight is that we are now significantly less safe as a nation. When you are peeling away layers of leadership, right down to field office squads and agents and even analysts, you are making America less safe. At any given time in this country, there are multiple terror plots being tracked by the FBI. And interference and intervention is what prevents them from playing out entirely. God help us if one of the offices impacted by this purge at several layers of leadership and even some of their best agents being walked out or told to go home, there's a terror plot playing out. That's not a political thing. That's a safety thing. The other thing that's happening is any semblance of diversity and inclusion is literally being wiped off the map. The New York Times put out a photo today of the walls of Quantico, the FBI Academy, where they're painting over the FBI's core values to include integrity, adherence to the Constitution, and diversity. A less diverse FBI is a less effective FBI. Try doing surveillance on the street in the inner city with two white guys. Try working undercover in a Middle Eastern terror organization with a white guy. It doesn't work that way. So we're becoming less and less safe very quickly.
Understood. I mentioned that Kash Patel disclaimed, said he opposed this, what the Times and the AP and other outlets are reporting. And I mentioned that, Frank, because as you know, and I think our viewers know, there are a lot of efforts underway to minimize and normalize everything, or to say that everything is a sort of an outburst, a quote-unquote emotional, exaggerated response to what Donald Trump is doing. And that's even one of the rhetorical devices. And yet, I think it matters tonight that what we just reported and what you said could make America less safe is something that Donald Trump's FBI nominee felt the need under oath to say, no. He wouldn't do that. He's against that. And it's literally what now today is being reported. That's the introduction for a short bit of sound from Patel under oath. Take a look.
If you can't commit that those FBI agents will be protected from political retribution, we can't accept you as FBI director.
All FBI employees will be protected against political retribution.
They deserve.
Frank?
Look, if anybody looks at what's happening in reality and what Kash Patel testified to before Congress, there's only one conclusion. He was being less than truthful. He was lying. And it is what we've seen other nominees do, back away from all of their prior statements and conduct and pretend to be somebody they're not, even while it's happening in real life. What the Senate should do is call him back to the Hill and say, please explain what's going on and how you don't possibly understand what's going on in the agency you're going to try to lead.
What should Americans do with this information? There's what Donald Trump promotes, and I think folks who follow the news have a sense of that. Dr. Phil is on the ride along. There's big, bold statements. There's executive orders which legally disintegrate in a matter of days because they weren't written according to the Constitution. But he wanted the headlines. There's all of that. And then there's this, what could be a pattern, according to the AP reporting, that into the Friday late hours, you get these other agenda items which affect a lot of things. They might affect the safety of Washington and Miami and other field offices, and they're not being promoted. They're almost being hidden. What are we to make of that, and what should people do?
So first order of business, contact your member of Congress, your member of the Senate, particularly if they serve on committees that are handling nominees, and particularly if it's judiciary with the FBI, and say, you feel less safe because of what's happening here. Secondly, inevitably, what I'm hearing is there will be funding requests to help these agents and employees, many of whom, by the way, are not eligible for retirement. They have kids to feed, tuition to pay for college kids, and they're going to be kicked out the door with nothing. And they're going to need to fight this in court. By the way, most of this is highly illegal. Summary dismissals without gross misconduct are illegal, but it could take a year or two for these to work their way through the courts. They're going to need help with legal funding.
And since you said it, let me let you explain that. So this could be an unlawful firing. It's not that it's some new crime, but that if they break the statute and the protections, it's unlawful. And yet one of the problems we're seeing, and testing or pushing is what exposes this, you're reminding folks that that has to then be pursued, in the federal court process, and can take a long time for an agent or anyone to get any remedy for that.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, think back to Pete Strzok or Andy McCabe at the highest levels of the FBI being terminated, all eventually getting their back pay, getting their pensions back. But that took a very long time. And those guys were without income for a very long time.